If you'll invest 30 minutes of your time this morning, we'll be accountable for this guest. Who is he? You'll meet him coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at grassy granite and marble on the frontage road off Highway 544 between the Intercoastal Waterway and South Carolina 31. We're visiting with the chairman of CornerCap Investment Counsel of Atlanta and Charlotte, Gene Hoots. Good morning, Gene.
Pleasure to see you today.
Thank you so much for coming in early on a Wednesday morning.
Glad to do it. Thank you.
A lot going on, of course. Now, do you spend most of your time in Atlanta, or are you there in Charlotte?
I'm in Charlotte most of the time.
You are in Charlotte.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming down last night to get here early in the morning. Of course, it's tough sometimes getting in, and of course, this location, grassy, granite, and marble. Have you walked through the store?
Yes, I have. It's very impressive.
Beautiful, isn't it?
It is indeed.
They really make a statement right out here. You see all the cars, even here at 7 a.m., cruising up and down 544. It's a wild time. A lot going on at CornerCap.
Yes, a lot is happening there. We've enjoyed quite a success as a company, and you remember us from our early days, I guess, when we first started. Our offices are in Atlanta, where most of the folks work. I'm the only one outside of the Atlanta office, and I serve the Charlotte market, mostly in marketing and client servicing there. Right. But we've had a good time running the company and building the company to its current state.
Y'all are about to celebrate 20 years, Gene?
That is correct. We've been in business as a company for 20 years. Tom Quinn, the co-founder and partner, started with me almost 30 years ago now. We worked together that long, and we were partners for a decade before we formed our own company and started out on our own.
Right. Are you originally from the Carolinas?
I am. I was born in Winston-Salem, and I grew up outside Winston-Salem in the Clemens community and spent most of my life in the Davie County, Yadkin County, Forsyth County areas of the Piedmont.
Yeah. Clemens, of course, is famous for the Bermuda Run. Or
Bermuda Run and Tanglewood Park, the golf courses.
Tanglewood,
yeah.
That's exactly
Those were
right.
cow pastures when I was a child.
Yes, yes. And you went to school, I saw, in North Carolina as well?
I did. I went to NC State as an undergraduate and then switched allegiances for a couple of years and moved over to Chapel Hill for MBA.
Was that tough?
It was kind of tough, making the move from one school to the other. But time passes, and I've made my peace with both schools now. They're alumni. That's been nearly 50 years.
I can't say your tie is NC State red, but your shirt is surely Chapel Hill blue,
right.
Carolina blue. And you've got some nice Carolina blue behind you here. This is, as you think about, obviously, growing up there in Davie County and thinking after you got your MBA at Chapel Hill, you could be anywhere. You could do anything. What was it about the Tar Heel State that got you staying there for a while?
Well, the first thing, I suppose, was simply devotion and love of family. I worked away in Delaware for a couple of years and met my wife and married there. And after a couple of years, decided to come back to North Carolina, primarily because of family. But it turned out to be just one of those decisions that was, by chance, a very good one. I ended up working and living in a state that's had tremendous growth, and now lots and lots of other people are discovering the state. Maybe too many, but that's a big part of what's happened there in the last few years.
Absolutely. The former Secretary of Administration during Governor Easley's first term and for a year during his second term will be with us tomorrow and Friday, Gwen Swenson, who is now the Special Assistant to the CEO of Duke Medicine, of the entire Duke University Health System, and, of course, the Duke Raleigh Hospital there, and a tremendous woman who we're excited. But a lot of folks, and, of course, we'll be with her tomorrow, but want to get into that aspect of the growth in North Carolina, and for you having been in the Winston-Salem area for a good while and now in Charlotte, and having gone to school in the Triangle, you've really covered all parts of North Carolina, Gene.
I've seen lots of changes in my lifetime there. It's been amazing. I never really expected to live in a city or see a city in North Carolina that has enjoyed the growth that Charlotte has. I've been there since 1996, and the changes just in that little over a decade have been phenomenal. The expansion of South Park as a mall and a destination shopping center and a place to live, as well as uptown Charlotte. It's been amazing what's happened.
Am I correct, Gene, you spent much of your life with R.J. Reynolds?
I did. I came back to North Carolina from Delaware and went to work for what was then R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company in 1965. And
65?
Yeah,
wow.
I started in 65, worked there 22 years, and then left. And as I think we've mentioned before, part of my departure had to do with the barbarians at the gate. It was an incident that occurred in that era, in 1988.
Yeah, for viewers who aren't familiar with Barbarians at the Gate, what do you mean when you say, is that the famous book there?
Yeah, that's the book. It was written by two fellas who were writers with the Wall Street Journal. They took a leave of absence and chronicled this event that took place. At that time, it was a landmark. It was a buyout of a major company and a leveraged buyout by a private firm. That's something that's done practically every week now, but on that scale, it had never been done before. In fact, until the last few months, that stood as the high water mark in the size of a company that had been bought that way. It was about $28 billion that they bought the company for. And it was quite a traumatic event for Winston-Salem to see a hometown company for something like 125 or 30 years be dismantled and hauled away. And that's hence the name, the Barbarians at the Gate.
Right, right. What were you doing at RJR, Gene?
I worked in my early career there in finance, doing project management, mostly financial analysis of companies that we were going to buy or individual projects. And then after a decade doing that, by chance, I moved over into the work of investments and got involved in running the R.J. Reynolds pension funds. That turned out to be an interesting assignment for me. In fact, it set the path from the rest of my life's career. But at the time, it was something that just came up almost by accident. As so many important decisions in our life do come, it just was totally out of the blue. In fact, I had planned at that point, and this was in 1976, I had worked 14 months on an acquisition that Reynolds was making in the oil business. We bought an oil company in Texas, and my plan was to leave Winston-Salem and move to Houston and be a Texas oil man and make a fortune out there. As it turned out, of course, the timing could not have been worse. I didn't get to go. They didn't let me have the job, and they sent me back to Winston-Salem. And 4 years later, the oil market in Texas collapsed as it did worldwide. I'd have been one of a large number of people walking around Houston without a job. So instead, I went back to Winston-Salem, was there a few months, and they offered me the job of running the Reynolds Pension Fund. It really wasn't much of a job, but it shows you, I think, a great illustration of what happened in the financial services business in America at that time. When I took over that fund at RJR, it had about $200 million in it, which may sound like a lot of money to most of us, but as individuals, but of course that's a pittance in the world of investing. And in the decade that I was there, Reynolds made acquisitions, the laws were changed so that pension funds had to be funded more fully. The company had to put lots of money into the fund, and the result was that over that 10-year period, that fund grew from $200 million to $4 billion worldwide.
No way.
There was a 20-fold increase in 10 years. So it turned out to be a job that was pretty exciting and interesting. So instead of ending up in the oil business, I ended up in one of the most exciting industries that we've seen in America in the last half of the 20th century.
How exciting, Gene. And you said that's where you met Tom Quinn?
That's where I met Tom Quinn. He came to work with me there, and then when the Barbarians took over, I was still in Winston-Salem. Tom had been transferred by one group of the Barbarians to Atlanta, and when the firm dissolved there and they moved a very small headquarters to Atlanta, most of the staff there in Atlanta was let go. And at that point, Tom and I decided to start our own business. We'd been managing the pension fund, the assets of the Reynolds plans, and we figured if we could do it for R.J. Reynolds, we could do it for other people, and that's when we set up CornerCap.
So that is how CornerCap really began? That
is how CornerCap began.
What exactly does CornerCap do when we see investment counsel, for instance?
Our job is managing individuals' money. We focus not on the institutional market. We would not typically manage money for giant corporations. Our market tends to be individuals who have come into money either by selling a business, by leaving a company with a huge 401k that they want to manage themselves, or somebody who's simply built a portfolio over the years and decides at some point they don't want to manage it themselves anymore. So we focus a lot on the management of those assets. And in addition, simply counseling with people and helping them with estate planning, tax planning, which is very, very important today.
Absolutely.
More so than it has been in years.
And often very difficult for normal folks to understand.
So that's what we do as a business.
That's tremendous. I saw back in 2004, we've got it here on the table, a book that you'd published, Being accountable.
Yeah.
Gene Hoots on investing. What was that like, Gene, putting a book together?
I'm not sure published is the right word. We printed it ourselves. It's not for sale. We've handed it out to our friends and clients. I put that together because of my disturbance at what I saw in the market in 2000 when the dot-com bubble came along. We, like I think most good investors, tend to be conservative, long-term focused.
Right.
And I saw the world just getting carried away with this dot-com business.
Oh, yeah.
In 1998, 1999.
You saw it then.
Oh, most of these things, of course, go on much longer than anybody in the business ever thinks they will. And it extended way beyond what we would have expected. And it was after that that I wrote a book because I wanted to convey to people my thoughts and my disturbance at the time over people's attitudes. And in being accountable, I take the position that so many people in that time got caught up with real greed on their own part, and yet when it was all over and they lost money, they looked around and said, gosh, I never dreamed that I could lose money like this, and I don't know how this happened, but it certainly isn't my fault. I'm not accountable for it, and somebody's going to pay whoever they could find to blame it on. And that's not the way business works, and it's not the way the world's supposed to work either.
No. We heard a lot about, obviously, here on January 21st on the celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when the Congressional Black Caucus Institute, the folks who were in town with the Myrtle Beach Area Chamber of Commerce, putting on the big Democratic debates on CNN.
Yeah.
And to see that, you think about being accountable now in the same way you discussed the dot-com boom and bust. I mean, the idea, obviously, of some of the issues that are impacting our current financial institutions with whether it's subprime or otherwise. Any thoughts on that right now?
Yeah,
Gene?
we've got, we're in an environment where this has occurred, the subprime market. I just read a book this summer that made a great impression on me, quite an impact. It's a book called The Black Swan, and it deals with the idea that all major events in history and major turning points in finance or any other field are virtually unpredictable. They just pop up out of the blue someplace, and that's true in the financial world. The subprime was a black swan. Nobody saw this coming ahead of time, and the whole idea in investing is that you can't really predict black swans. That's by definition, they are unpredictable.
Right.
And you simply have to invest in a way that says be diversified, be prepared for all sorts of events that might happen because you never know what's coming next. And that's about all you can do. And that's our thought. And in this, we talk about the need to just be long-term investors, to be accountable to yourself. And you talked about some of the other issues that the politicians were talking about here. I talk about a couple of those in the book that I feel very strongly about. One is health care, and the other is the Social Security system.
Why do you feel so strong about health care, Gene?
Well, one of the reasons for that is I went through a long bout of dealing with the medical system through working with my wife. My wife contracted breast cancer and fought a 5-year bout. Unfortunately, in the long run, a losing battle, but that gave me a lot of exposure to the healthcare system. And as I went through it, I looked at insurance companies, I looked at doctors and at hospitals. There's all sorts of frustrations. And you hear these stories with anybody who's gone to the hospital. I can't understand my bill. I don't know what's going on here. I can't understand what my doctor's saying to me. And I've come to the realization again that my take on it was, again, in being accountable, the largest part of the problem lies not with the insurance companies, not with the doctors, but with us as citizens expecting more from the healthcare system than it's going to be able to deliver us.